everybody, it's Kira and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing my Owls Readathon wrap up for you guys. So the month of April was the Owls Readathon and I completed all my exams, which is amazing for being the first time ever doing this readathon. So that means I'm like super excited for the Newts, which I'm pretty sure happens in August. But yeah, I'm just going to go through the different exams, like what I ended up doing, and then kind of give like mini reviews for each of the books that I read. So I chose the career of librarian and I needed 5 owls for that. So the first one was Ancient Runes, which was to read a book with a heart, either on the cover or in the title. And so for that I read Cross My Heart and Hope to Spy by Allie Carter. This was a reread for me. As you'll see, most of these books ended up being rereads for me. But it's book 2 in the Gallagher Girls series, and I had so much fun rereading this one because this is the one where you meet Zach, and Cammy and Zach's first meeting is so much fun. It's so good. But also, like, it's really interesting, like, following, because it follows very closely after what happens in the first book. So you're still, like, writing the tales of what happened with Josh in the first book, and then you introduce Zach and these other Blackthorn boys, and it's really interesting, like, watching the group's dynamic kind of change because of that. So this was a really fast read for me. I flew through it very quickly and quite enjoyed my time rereading it. So next up was arithmancy, and for that I needed to read something that was outside my favorite genre, or like that's not in your normal genre, and so I chose literary fiction and I read Only Child by Rhiannon Navin. This destroyed me. This was a book that I'd won in a giveaway some time ago, I think, but I didn't really know anything about it going into it, so I was very excited to read it. And I can't say that I enjoyed the book necessarily because it's not the type of book that you enjoy. So in this story you follow this one family, and the book is told from the point of view of Zach, who is a first grader, so he's 6 years old. And he has an older brother named Andy who is in 5th grade. And so the book opens on this one day when they're both at school, and there is a gunman that comes to the school. And so you follow Zach as he's like ushered away from the school, and you find out that Andy has been killed by the gunman. And so that's part of the title, is Only Child. Now Zach is an only child. And so the book just follows, from Zach's point of view, him and his parents trying to figure out how to deal with the loss of Andy, but also like Zach having been through a traumatic event like that, trying to figure out like how he's going to function. So the book is told, because it's told from Zach's point of view, the sentence structure is like very simple and there isn't a ton of like big words. And so it makes like a more naive point of view because Zach is 6 years old. And so he's mature in a lot of ways. Like, he totally understands that Andy is dead and that he's like not coming back. But he's immature in the ways of how he ends up dealing with things just because he's 6 years old and has to go through this traumatic event. And you also see his parents dealing with their grief in different ways as well. But it's interesting because like as an adult reading this, you pick up on like more of what's going on with the parents, more so than Zach necessarily understands what's going on. And like part of the storytelling too is like he'll go off on tangents quite a bit because that's how a child's mind works. Like, if you remember when you were little telling your parents a story, you easily go off on tangents like, oh, that reminds me of like last summer when we did this, you know? And so it's really cool to like see that. So it's interesting because you get like Zach's background within him telling you these, like going through these tangents, but it's so wonderfully done. Like, this book destroyed me because I cried so many times while reading it, because you see like both of his parents struggling with their own grief of losing a child, but then like trying to figure out how to be there for Zach. And they have their own struggles in their marriage as well, which of course Zach doesn't completely understand, but like as a reader you are way more understanding, like you get what's going on between the two of them. And so just I don't know, it just explores it so beautifully, but simply at the same time. And so it's a really, really powerful book. So again, it's not necessarily the type of book that you like enjoy reading, and I don't know if I will ever like reread this just because of that. Definitely content warning, trigger warning for like PTSD and like stuff to do with school shootings, but if you can, like, please read this book. It is incredible, and I've never heard it talked about before, but I think it's a really good look at school shootings just from the point of view of a kid who has to go through them. So this was definitely outside my normal genre, but I, again, didn't enjoy it, but I really, really appreciated reading it, and I'm glad that I did. Next up, I have Defense Against the Dark Arts, which was to read a book set on the coast or at the sea. So for that, I chose Beautiful Ruins by Jess Walter. This book I have such mixed feelings about. So it's kind of hard to explain what the plot of this book is because you follow it's like very interweaving storylines between multiple different characters and different times. So one of the characters is this Italian dude who owns this hotel off the coast of Italy, but it's like a really tiny rundown place. So during the summer of 1962, there's an American actress who ends up staying at his hotel. And so then you follow him years later in present day, which I'm pretty sure was 2012, when he's trying to figure out what happened to her. But you also are following this woman who is an assistant to this really famous director, and you're following this guy who is an aspiring scriptwriter. And so it deals a lot with like Hollywood and how fame works kind of thing. The way that the interweaving plot lines and timelines were done, it was so cool. Trying to figure out like, okay, how does this connect to this? And then once you see those connections, you're like, oh, okay, this goes with this. And then like it all comes full circle at the end of the book, and it was really, really cool. But I did not like how this book talked about women and sex. There was so much sex in this book, and I was like, I don't need this. And like a lot of times, because most of the main characters were men, the first thing that they noticed about women was how they looked physically, and like it was just very annoying to read about. There were like the two main characters who were women were a little bit more fleshed out, so like it wasn't as bad, but it was still like very annoying to read, and I would just like have to put down this book and be like, why are you explaining things this way, or why are you being, there was a lot of like crude language as far as like sex goes, and it was just very annoying. So, but like the interweaving storylines was so cool and so well done. So like I said, very mixed feelings about this book. Next up is History of Magic, which was to read a book that included witches or wizards. So I kind of maybe, it's not cheating, but I went with Harry Potter, because why not? So I read Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince for this prompt, to continue my reread of the Harry Potter series. This one, like, I think this is my second or third read through this series, and so Half-Blood Prince was one of the books that I remembered the least about because the movie adaptation is so different, and I know the movies way better than I know the books, and so there was a lot, especially with like Voldemort's past that you explore in this one, that I had forgotten, like the individual connections that Dumbledore is trying to make and show Harry. It is interesting like rediscovering that. Also, I forgot about how much like drama there is between Ron and Hermione, and it was like kind of annoying, but at the same time like it makes sense. And it was really funny, Harry being like obsessed with Ginny and trying to figure out like his feelings for her and how that was going to work out. But I think like this is one of my least favorite books. It's just like not appealing to me. Like there's not a ton that actually happens in this book until the very end, because up until then it's basically just them at school, and Harry's convinced that Draco's a Death Eater, but everybody says no. And Dumbledore is trying to tell Harry about Voldemort's past. Like, I don't know, I just feel like there isn't a ton that happens. Like, there's a ton of information that you're given, especially about Voldemort, that is helpful for the last book, but it's just not one of my favorites. But, I mean, it's Harry Potter, so I'm never gonna say no to a Harry Potter reread. And then the last class that I needed for the librarian career was Transfiguration, which is a book or series that includes shape-shifting. And so for that, I reread City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. This was a really fun reread because the third book comes out, I think, in June. And so I wanted to reread this book before I could read the third book. I love this world so much. And I think I'd forgotten how much I loved it until I reread this. So this is a really great fantasy. It's the first in a trilogy fantasy series about just all these different kinds of jinn. So you follow our main character Nari as she unwittingly calls an evil jinn, or like an ifrit, I'm pretty sure is what it is. And so then she ends up, like, there's a jinn that comes and saves her, and he's like, oh, you're actually this long-lost descendant of this certain type of jinn, and so you're gonna come with me to the magical city of Daevabad, and you're gonna, like, live there, because you can't live in the human world anymore. And so I really appreciate, like, it's a similar vibe to, like, Harry Potter, not knowing anything about the wizarding world, is that, like, you get information fed to the reader as information is fed to the main character because they don't know what's going on. So I really appreciate that aspect of it. And then you also follow Ali. He's one of the princes of Daevabad, and he's just so funny. He's very naive in a lot of ways, but he's also somebody who's trying to help those less fortunate than him, even when he's not necessarily supposed to. It's just such a good book, you guys. It was so much fun to reread, and I can't wait. There's so much, like, political intrigue, and so there's, like, the stuff that happens right at the end of this book sets up what happens in the second book, and I had completely forgotten about it, so it was really fun to reread this, and now I need to read the second one again so I can read the third one, and I'm so excited for that to come out. So that completed the librarian career path, but then I also decided to add animagus training because that only added one book to my list because it needed arithmancy and transfiguration, and I already had both of those. So the only one that added was potions, which was to read a book with less than 150 pages. And so for that, I ended up reading The Witch of Duva by Leigh Bardugo. I read this on audio through the thing that Audible is doing right now that's like some of their books are on for free. So this is like an hour-long audiobook. It's not very long at all. So I listened to this. It's like it's like a fairy tale within the Grisha universe, and I did not expect it to go the way that it ended up going. The twist that came in near the end of the book, I was not expecting at all. So it's a very, like, dark and gruesome and weird story, but it was there, so I read it. I mean, Leigh Bardugo's writing is so good that, like, I didn't really care that I didn't enjoy the book. Or like I don't know if you can even call it a book, it's like a novella kind of thing. But like I didn't enjoy it necessarily because it was just like very weird, but I read it, so there you go. So yeah, that is it. Those were all the books that I read, so 6 in total for the Owls Readathon, and I completed both the librarian career path and the animagus training. So I don't know what the newts is going to look like exactly because I've never done this, but I'm very excited for them to come up. So yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. How did you do in your Owls Readathon? Did you pass all your classes? Hopefully. So if you want to follow me on social media, all my links will be in the description as always. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!